This is Trevor Phillips, alone in his trailer in the middle of the desert. You just switched over to him. A second ago you were somebody else, which means whatever he's busy with right now, you didn't start it and you didn't see it happen. Watch what he's doing. He's pushing a severed human leg down his toilet. There was no mission for this, and no cutscene where anyone died. You switched to Trevor and caught him cleaning up after a killing you were never shown. Most players see it once, take it for a random gag, and drive off. Everybody who plays Grand Theft Auto 5 comes away describing Trevor the same way. He's the crazy one, the random one, the psycho who kills for no reason. But that's not really who he is, and the truth is a lot darker than the reputation. Trevor isn't random. Everything he does is on purpose, and the moment that sinks in, the murders Rockstar built missions around stop being the whole story of his violence. They're only the part that made it onto the screen. The rest of his victims are drifters and hitchhikers and homeless people nobody ever reports missing, killed off camera and cleaned up quietly while you were off playing as Michael or Franklin. The missions are the documented cases. Everything worse than that happens in the gaps, and Rockstar wrote him with the markers of a serial killer, then built the whole game to keep you from ever adding it up. I'm going to prove it, using nothing but the game's own footage. Start with the killings you do get to see, because he does every one of them the same way, and after you've watched that happen a few times, you'll recognize it in the ones that play out off screen. It's easy to forget he was there from the very first second too. Long before the desert and the trailer, the game opens on a heist in a snowbound northern town, and one of the 3 robbers it hands you to play as, right there in the opening, is Trevor. Years before the story proper, before you know a single thing about him, you've already worn his skin through a robbery that falls apart in the snow. Then the game parks him and lets you settle in with Michael and Franklin, so that by the time he comes screaming back into the story, you've half forgotten he was ever there. You didn't start with a stranger, you started with him. Take the first person you ever watch him kill, a biker named Johnny Klebitz, and he isn't some nobody the writers cooked up to be a speed bump. If you played the Lost and Damned chapter of Grand Theft Auto 4, you spent a whole game as Johnny. He was your guy. You rode with him. You lived his story. You got him to the end of it. Rockstar takes a man they once handed you as a hero and, in Trevor's very first scene, has him beaten into the dirt over a girl and a few harsh words. That's the opening lesson Trevor teaches the game. You can turn someone who mattered into roadkill and keep the music light. It kicks off over almost nothing. Johnny's the one falling apart here, wrecked because Trevor's been sleeping with his girl, and Trevor's first move is almost gentle. He offers the man a hug, an apology, arms open. Then the hug turns into a beating, and he doesn't let up long after Johnny's gone still. And he cracks a flippant little joke, dusts himself off, and gets on with his day like he just took the trash out. Comfort and killing in one unbroken motion, which is the truest introduction to Trevor you could ask for. And that's the whole arc, beginning to end. Something tiny sets him off. He takes total control of the moment. The violence runs miles past what it needed to. The body gets handled, and he walks away like none of it happened. Once you know the shape, you'll catch it everywhere. He wipes out an entire family inside their meth lab and goes straight back to running his business. He walks out of an apartment covered in another person's blood. That's the part worth watching. Not the kill itself, but the way he acts the second it's over, which is like nothing happened at all. A normal person who kills someone is rattled by it, even a hardened criminal. Michael, the other career killer you play, is haunted by his, sitting in a therapist's office, jolting awake in a sweat, chewing on his own guilt for the whole game. Franklin hesitates, weighs things, has lines he'd rather not step over. Trevor isn't like either of them. He kills, he goes back to his day, and he does it the same flat way every single time, because the people he kills were never worth anything to him to begin with. That couldn't care less reaction is the clearest window you get into how his head really works, and it lines up almost perfectly with the way real serial killers describe themselves. That's the mind you're sitting next to for 30 hours. And if killing costs him nothing, the handful of murders Rockstar bothered to build missions around were never going to be all of them. And he tells you these killings exist. He tells you in the very first story he ever shares about himself. He's describing how he met Michael, years back, when he was running a small smuggling operation up north. He was waiting on a runway one day, expecting 1 man, and 2 showed up instead, and Trevor walked over, got close, and put a flare gun in a stranger's face over basically nothing. It didn't kill the man cleanly. The flare was still burning as they hauled the body off to a lake, and the sight of it turned both their stomachs. That's the famous part of the story. Now listen to the line right before it. The man he's telling asks whether he'd ever killed anyone before that day, and Trevor barely stops to think. Some deer, he says. Some foxes. Drifters, nothing serious. Drifters, he slides it in between the foxes and the shrug, the most boring detail he can think of, and then he never brings it up again. The first time through, it means nothing to you. Line it up with everything else he does though, and it means everything. He just told you, in the opening hour, that there's a category of human being he's killed often enough to list them next to shooting wildlife, and that they matter to him about as much. And the deer and the foxes in that sentence aren't a figure of speech. The game gives him a hunting buddy out in the county and whole missions where you crouch in the brush and drop animals through a scope. So when he sets drifters down in the same breath, right between the wildlife and the shrug, he means it the way it sounds. People he's hunted, filed under the same heading as game. And he says that word, drifters, like a man describing a habit he's had for a long time. So it's worth asking how long. Because when Trevor talks about where he comes from, the same thing that's in front of you now was already there when he was a boy. He tells it in pieces, scattered across the whole game, and you have to take all of it with a hand on your wallet. Because Trevor is the only witness to his own childhood, and he's a man who performs his own tragedy for anyone who'll sit still. But the pieces line up too well to be nothing. His father beat him. His mother did her damage a different way, from the inside, treating him like a burden and a disappointment. An ex-stripper and an addict who looked at her son and saw, in her words, a useless boy. And the thing he keeps circling back to, the story he tells more than once, is the day his father took him to a shopping mall and left him there. Just drove off and didn't come back. Trevor says he went back years later and burned the place to the ground. Whether he did or not almost doesn't matter. What matters is that this is the memory he reaches for to explain himself. A child left standing in a parking lot, and a fire lit an answer. A kid like that doesn't grow into the drifters line out of nowhere. And Trevor, in his offhand way, tells you it started early. He claims that as a boy he strangled a clarinet player with the man's own instrument. He claims he took a hockey stick to a coach who'd wronged him. And the details there are ugly enough that the game only lets him gesture at them. Hold on to the first one especially, the clarinet, because it comes back around later in a way you won't expect. He even hands you a fear, which is rare for him. There's a mission where a running gag reveals that Trevor is afraid of clowns, and listen to how he talks to one, telling it he's a big boy now, that it can't hurt him anymore. No stable man makes that joke. It's a grown killer talking to a painted face like it's something that got to him when he was small and never quite let go. There's one stretch of his life he did try to go straight for, and it's the saddest thing in the whole file. As a young man, he wanted to fly. He went off to train with the Canadian military, reached for the sky and the uniform, and one clean thing to be. They threw him out before he finished, because even then he was too violent and too far gone to keep around. The one door he ever knocked on that wasn't crime got shut in his face, and the reason it shut was him. That one comes back later, in the ugliest way. The day you watch the man who dreamed of flying throw another pilot out of a moving helicopter. That clown fear pays off later, in a way the gag never sets up. There's a drug trip mission where Trevor hallucinates a whole swarm of them, and what he shouts at them makes clear, it's old fear, something that got its hooks in when he was small and never let go. Most players blow through the mission for the payout and laugh. What the laugh walks past is the tattoo. A man this scared of clowns his whole life still walked into a park was a police pilot out of a flying helicopter. Partly because the man saw something he wasn't supposed to. The kid who got told he was too dangerous to sit in a cockpit is the one up in the air now, and the licensed pilot is the one going out the door. He kills a man down by the river, in a way ugly enough that the game only references it and never shows it. A hitchhiker, killed off screen, mentioned once and gone. Even his own brother turns up as a body he probably made. There's a street performer in Vinewood dressed as a zombie, and if you wander over as Trevor, of all the things the two of them could talk about, the conversation drifts to his brother Ryan, who died, Trevor says, in an accident. In the same breath he lets slip that he wasn't especially fond of Ryan. And the way he slides past it is the exact tone he uses for the drifters and the quarry. He never comes right out and admits it, and the game never confirms a thing. It just lets Trevor say the word accident in that flat sliding voice, right beside the part about not being fond of him, and leaves the arithmetic to you. Plenty of players walk away certain. The game makes sure it can never quite be pinned on him. None of these are missions. None of them earn so much as a cutscene. They exist as one-line admissions that Trevor is killing steadily, constantly, in the space between the parts you play, and the story notes it and walks on. And notice how little it takes for him to kill when there's territory in it. The way he plants his flag in Blaine County at the start is to walk straight into his rivals and wipe them out, marking one of them, torching their operation, clearing the board so Trevor Phillips Industries has room to grow. And the ones he wipes out to build that empire aren't faceless either, even if the story moves past them in seconds. Take the O'Neill brothers, a whole backwoods family of meth cooks, close to a dozen of them, who make the mistake of competing with him. Trevor's answer is to drive out to their farmhouse, burn it down with them inside, and then hunt the survivors across the fields through a rifle scope, one at a time, the same way he files his drifters right next to deer and foxes. An entire family line, ended over market share, and the story barely slows down to market. That's the tempo of him. A dozen dead here, a dozen there, each cluster a footnote, until the footnotes are most of the county. There's a flip side to everything the game keeps off screen. When it hands you the controls as Trevor, it gives you no way to stop killing. Players have tried running Trevor as gently as the game will allow, skipping every death they're given the option to skip, and it can't be done. Before his introduction mission is even finished, he's already left a double-digit pile of bodies behind him. With the other two, restraint is at least on the table. With Trevor, it's paved into the floor. The game won't let you be him without killing, because killing is what being him is. He's also the only one of the three the game trusts with a rampage. Those belong to Trevor alone, little self-contained bloodbaths where he plants his feet and cuts down everyone within reach until the street's gone quiet, and the game frames them as him blowing off steam, the way another man might go for a jog. Michael doesn't get them. Franklin doesn't get them. Somebody looked at 3 killers and decided only one of them would enjoy it. And it was the same one they handed the cannibal pipeline and the leg in the toilet. And those rampages have a shape worth spelling out, because they double as a map of exactly what sets him off. There are 5 of them, tucked away as optional missions most players never finish, and in each one Trevor walks up to a knot of people, gets needled, and paints the street red. Rednecks outside a liquor store, one Los Santos gang, then another. A base full of soldiers, a pack of hipsters. Clear all 5 and the game rewards you with a trophy called Red Mist, which tells you plainly how it wants you to feel. But look at what lights the fuse each time. Half of it is the usual, somebody insulting his mother. The other half is somebody mocking him for being Canadian. That's the crack under all the armor. This monster, this man who hands strangers to cannibals, comes apart at a joke about his accent, because underneath everything he's ashamed of where he's from and what he is, and he answers that shame with a body count. He'll rage for an hour if you mock his voice, then turn around and do cruel little impressions of everyone else's, an Englishwoman's, a Chinese man's, because the one thing he can't stand more than being laughed at is being someone nobody's afraid of. And the world itself seems to know what he is, even while the story keeps it from you. Bring Trevor anywhere near the bikers he used to share the county with, and they turn hostile on sight. No cutscene, no prompt. Just men who take one look at him and reach for a weapon over what he did to their own. Pedestrians give him a wider berth than they give the other two. His record is hidden from you, the player, and from nearly everyone in his life, and it was never once hidden from the people who have to live near him. They already learned to run. The developers put their clearest statement about him into the map itself, no cutscene required. Up in the mountains there's a cannibal cult, and here and there you'll find a stranded stranger on the roadside, who you can, instead of helping, drive up the mountain and hand over to be eaten. But only as Trevor. Michael can't. Franklin can't. Somebody sat down and built an entire pipeline for feeding living people to cannibals, and then handed the key to exactly one of the three men you play. The map didn't grow that pipeline on its own. The developers built it and handed the key to exactly one man, telling you without a single line of dialogue what Trevor does with strangers when the camera's off him, and you should know what you're handing them to. The altruist cult is a doomsday sect holed up in the hills, older members waiting out the end of the world, and they pay cash for living people because they eat them. Trevor knows exactly what the money buys. He drives up there, collects his envelope, and drives back down as many times as you have strangers to feed them. Out of everything in San Andreas, this is the one activity built entirely around delivering human beings to their deaths for pocket change, and it belongs to Trevor alone. The other two aren't offered it because it wouldn't fit them. It fits him like a glove, and handing strangers over to be eaten is only half of it, because the game keeps hinting he's on the menu himself. Right before one of the heists, there's a quiet little scene where Trevor's playing host, warming something in the microwave and pushing it on Michael like a proud cook. Michael takes one look at the plate and asks what he's even looking at, and Trevor, breezy as anything, allows that it might be an eyelid. Michael, a man who has personally killed dozens, is the one who can't touch the food. Switch to Trevor another time, and you can catch him muttering a scrap of advice to nobody. That you should never eat Indian. Long pause, people. The pause is the whole thing, and it isn't quite a joke. And those cannibals up in the mountains he keeps feeding people to, he calls them old friends. He didn't stumble onto that cult by accident. He knew them from before, and it lets you put it together yourself the way it makes you do all the real work with Trevor. And if you've been listening, you've probably built a picture of a rabid animal, something that bites whatever's nearest. That picture is where most people stop, and it's wrong. The game goes out of its way to prove it's wrong. Trevor has rules. Watch what actually sets him off in that bridge scene. He throws the man over the side for being a bigot. Trevor hates racists. He rides Franklin's corner constantly, calls him his friend, and blows up at the police for hassling a black man over nothing. When he's forced to help a couple of immigration goons, he needles them the whole time and compares them to Klansmen to their faces. He can't stand Merriweather, the private army, and half of why he keeps hitting them is that their brand of organized cruelty disgusts him. He kidnaps a crime boss's wife, Patricia, to send a message, and then, living out in the desert with her, treats her with a strange courtly tenderness, cooking for her, dancing with her, guarding her like something precious. And when he's finally forced to hand her back, he's openly heartbroken about it. He snaps at Wade for talking down about a girl. He swears that if anyone ever hurts Michael's daughter, he'll be the one to make it right. When a sleazy television host tries to talk Michael's teenage daughter into stripping on a live audition show, it's Trevor who runs the man down, hauls him out by the collar, and makes him dance in his underwear at gunpoint instead. This is a man with a moral code, a real one, with lines in it he won't cross, and lines he'll kill you for crossing. And the few people he does let inside the circle, he's strangely decent to. He tells his meth cook, chef, to mind his manners in front of guests. He runs the whole operation on a rule that everyone under his roof treats each other, and the women especially, with respect. That loyalty is real, and it's exactly what makes the rest of him so cold, because it proves he can see a person as a person whenever he decides to. He just saves it for a tiny handful, and treats everyone outside that handful like weather. You can even read the code off the club he stole. Trevor runs the Vanilla Unicorn like a man with rules about the place, fiercely protective of the dancers who work there, quick to rough up any customer who forgets his manners with them. He'll murder a stranger for a laugh and defend a stripper's dignity in the same afternoon, and both come off the same rigid. Private ledger of who's owed respect and who's owed nothing at all. Set that next to everything else you've watched. He'll feed a harmless stranger to cannibals for a laugh and throw a man off a bridge for using a slur. Both things are true about the same person at the same time. And a rigid personal code welded to constant killing is what an organized killer looks like. The real ones almost always have a code, a private logic about who deserves it and who's off limits, a story they tell themselves that lets them keep score and sleep at night. The randomness people project onto Trevor is the one thing he isn't. He's selecting. He's always been selecting. The drifters got chosen the same way the bigot on the bridge got chosen. By a man running everyone he meets through a set of rules only he can see. And listen to how he talks while he does all of it. Because it's the last thing the reputation would lead you to expect. Of the three men you play, Trevor is the most articulate by a distance, the one with the widest vocabulary and the driest wit. a man who spent years at a military academy before the world was finished with him. He designs the biggest, most intricate jobs in the game and runs them clean under pressure. The dumb, rabid animal is a costume. What's underneath is a sharp, calculating, oddly educated man who long ago decided that most of the people around him don't count, and a decision like that, made by someone fully able to know better, is a far colder thing than any amount of mindless rage. The moment you accept that he chooses, one killing in the middle of the story stops being background noise and turns into the coldest thing in the whole game. When Trevor came to the city, he moved himself into the apartment of a soft, frightened dock worker named Floyd, who lived under the thumb of his girlfriend Deborah. What Trevor does to Floyd over those weeks, the game mostly keeps behind closed doors, and it's meant to. He takes the man's home, his dignity, his sense of safety, and there's an encounter the story implies and refuses to show that leaves Floyd hollowed out and broken. The camera looks away from all of it, the same way it looks away from everything else Trevor does when it gets too real. You're left to understand what happened from the shape of the silence around it. And think back to that switch scene from earlier. Trevor lying in bed with a grown man too frightened to move. That was this apartment. That was Floyd. The private degradation and the killing happen at the same address, weeks apart, and the game plays the first as a punchline and buries the second behind a cut to black. And the thing the story keeps implying about how Trevor uses people has almost nothing to do with desire and everything to do with power. He'll go after anyone, man or woman, less out of attraction than to establish who's on top and make the other person small. What the game implies about that apartment lives in the gray space the camera won't enter, and the story wraps it in awkward comedy so you won't sit with what it's pointing at. It's the same move as everything else he does, taking a thing that isn't his and daring the world to say a word about it. The bodies are only the loudest version of it. Then Deborah comes home from a work trip to find a stranger living in her home. She screams at him to leave, then pulls a gun out of a drawer. Floyd, pushed past the last edge he had, grabs a knife, and the screen cuts to black. You never see it. This is a game that will happily show you a man being tortured in slow, graphic detail, and it will not show you this. When the picture comes back, Trevor is walking out of that apartment soaked in blood, and the news fills in the rest of what you weren't allowed to watch. Deborah shot Floyd. Trevor stabbed Deborah to death. By now you don't even need to be shown it, because you've watched it happen enough times to fill it in yourself. She set him off, he took over, and it went where it always goes. The only difference this time is that the camera pulled away for the middle of it and left you a bloody man and a news report to reconstruct the rest from. And when Wade comes up the stairs asking where his cousin went, Trevor tells him they disappeared. The exact word from the quarry, which is how you know he didn't just reach for it in the moment. It's a phrase he keeps loaded, because he's explained a disappearance before and expects to again. And here's the detail that makes Wade the loneliest man in the game. Floyd was Wade's cousin. The same Wade whose festival friends Trevor drove out to the quarry and never brought back. So Trevor has now killed the people Wade came to town with, and the last family Wade had left, both of them, and Wade knows about neither. What he does about it is the coldest kindness in the story. He walks Wade into the strip club he's just stolen, sits him down, and buys him an endless run of lap dances, one after another, to keep him distracted and content and too busy to ever ask the right question. He erased the man's whole world and then paid for his entertainment so he'd never notice, and that's why Wade trails him around like a beaten dog. He's being kept happy by the man who took everything from him. Here's how far the cover went. That mission is called Hang 10, a surfing term, light, breezy, the sort of thing you'd name a beach episode. That is not the name it was born with. Dig into the game's own files and you'll find what Rockstar first called it, before they changed their minds. Paradise Lost, named after the poem about the fall of man, about being cast out of the garden forever. They wrote a double murder, gave it a title heavy enough to sink a ship, and then, sometime before release, quietly swapped it for a joke about surfing. There's more. Sitting finished in those same files is a phone call, recorded and done, where Trevor calls someone to talk through what he just did in that apartment. They cut it. It never plays. So the camera turned away. The confession got deleted, and the whole thing got renamed to sound like nothing happened at all. And yet, for everything they buried, they left one piece of it sitting in the open. Inside that apartment, there's a teddy bear that belonged to the couple, and Trevor spends his idle time mutilating it, doing things to it Rockstar is coy about, in the same careful way it's coy about everything else with him. Then, the couple die in that room. They hid the killing and left the trophy on the bumper, betting you'd never connect the two. That bear even has a name, and the name tells you Rockstar knew exactly what they were doing with it. It's called Mr. Raspberry Jam, and before the couple died it belonged to Deborah, sitting in their home as a piece of the life they had together. When Trevor first moves in, it lets you pick the thing up and play with it, right up until Floyd, cringing, begs him to leave it alone. Then Floyd and Deborah die in that room, and the toy you were just playing with becomes the thing riding his bumper. A dead woman's plaything, lifted off the scene of her murder and handed a cute little name so you'll grin at it instead of flinch. Rockstar even ties one more knot around it. Swap that bumper for any other option and Mr. Raspberry Jam disappears, so the only way to keep him is to leave the truck exactly as the killings left it, trophy and all. The one time the game does put his cruelty right in your hands, it's careful to make it a man the story has already condemned. And even then, Trevor finds a way to show you the machine underneath. Midway through, the government hands him a suspect named Mr. K and tells him to torture the information out of the man, and you're the one working the tools. The part worth watching is what he says while he does it. He steps outside the moment and lectures you and the agents on what torture is, that it doesn't work, that nobody gives good information to make pain stop, that the whole practice is just powerful people proving they can. He's right, and he's calmly explaining it while he does the thing he's explaining. A man in total control narrating his own atrocity like a tour guide. And then he makes a choice that tells you how his mercy works. When it's over, Trevor decides to let Mr. K live and drives him to the airport. And it looks for a second like decency. It isn't. He spares the man mostly to spite the government agent who wanted him dead. A last little act of not taking orders. His kindness, when it shows up, tends to have something in it for Trevor. There's a version of this same scene, one the game treats as a failure state and waves off as non-canon, where the torture goes wrong and Mr. K dies on the table. And Trevor's reaction there is the tell. He calls himself a moron. He's angry that he tortured what he calls a seemingly innocent man to death. For one unguarded second, he sounds like someone who feels the weight of it. Whether that's real guilt or just another performance, he never lets it near the surface again. And you're left unsure which is scarier. Because if part of him knows, then every flat shrug after every killing is a choice too. And a small side job proves that he can choose. That the control is always there when he wants it. A bail agent named Maud sends Trevor after 4 people who skipped bail, and he gets $10,000 for each one he brings back alive, and only $5,000 if he kills them. It's a test, built right into the money. Can he hold back when there's a reason to? He can. If you want the full payout, you hunt 4 armed men across the county and take every one of them without killing a single one. He's fully capable of restraint all day when it suits him, which means every time he doesn't hold back, when holding back was right there on the table paying double, it was a decision. The drifters weren't the overflow of a man who couldn't stop himself. They were the choices of a man who can stop anytime he likes, and mostly can't be bothered. So why? Why does a man who can choose keep choosing this? The answer runs back to that switch scene I told you to hold on to. The one where he's alone in the dark muttering about his mother. There's a mission you can only find after the main story is over, where Trevor comes home to his trailer and finds his mother sitting inside, waiting for him, and the most violent man in the game. The one who's killed everyone we've talked about without so much as flinching, crumbles. She berates him the second she sees him, needles him about never writing, never visiting, never finding a girl, asks him flat out if he's a disappointment. And Trevor gets down on his knees. He apologizes. He grovels at her feet and asks what he can do to make it right. And she tells him to go steal her a truckload of pills, and he does. And when he comes back, she's gone. Vanished, no goodbye. No trace. And a lot of players have landed on the same unsettling read of that scene. Because of how it's built. No other character ever sees her. Try to walk back into the trailer after she sends you off and the door's locked, with her voice still yelling at you from inside. And yet throw enough explosives at the place to kill whatever's in there, and the door quietly clicks open to show you nothing at all. No body. Just a maid standing in the room the voice was coming from. She turns up out of nowhere, in a trailer in the middle of the desert that even Trevor's closest people can barely find. She asks for drugs and evaporates the moment she has them. The way it's staged, a lot of players have come away convinced she isn't there at all, that she's a hallucination, a mother he's conjuring out of guilt and grief. A darker corner of that theory wonders whether the guilt runs deeper than never writing her back. The game refuses to settle any of it on purpose. And for what we're tracing, it doesn't have to. Because either way, the meaning is the same. This is the wound. Everything else runs off it. Watch where his rage actually points once you know that. The single fastest way to get someone killed near Trevor is to call him one particular word. Insult his mother and he'll wipe out a room full of strangers who had nothing to do with it. It's the one wound he never learned to cover, and it sits underneath a huge share of the killings you watched. A father who left him in a parking lot, and a mother who looked at him and saw a useless boy built a man who can't be near the idea of either without something breaking open. People have reached for a clinical name for the thing that takes him over in those moments. Intermittent explosive disorder. The switch that turns an insult into a corpse. Whatever you want to call it, the game stays consistent about where the fuse runs. It runs straight back to her. and Rockstar knew exactly which shelf they were building him on. People have pointed out for years that Trevor is stitched partly out of horror's most famous mother-haunted killer, Norman Bates from Psycho, down to the devotion to a mother who may only live in his head, and the habit of slipping into women's clothes. That's not a coincidence the writers backed into. It's a costume they picked, a signal for anyone watching closely about the kind of man they'd actually written underneath all the jokes. And you catch the shape of that shame in the quietest line he owns. Keep Trevor hanging around with Michael and Franklin long enough and, somewhere in all the swagger, he'll let something small slip out, that he doesn't want his mother to see him like this. The most frightening man in the state, half apologizing to a woman who isn't in the room, still a boy hoping she won't catch him being the thing she always told him he was. Everything else he does is loud enough to bury that sentence, and not one bit of it ever manages to. You can watch that wound go off at full volume the day he learns Michael's alive. The news that the friend he mourned for 9 years faked his own death and simply walked away breaks something loose in him. For years, he'd kept an uneasy truce with these people, sharing the county, doing quiet business, leaving each other alone. That single piece of news torches all of it, and he answers it by wiping out nearly everyone he'd been sharing Blaine County with. He massacres the entire local biker chapter, burns their camp to the ground, runs a rival gang boss's trailer into the river, and clears the whole board in one long red afternoon. It wasn't about money or turf. It was the plain, unbearable fact that someone he loved had left him and lived. It also explains the strangest, almost tender thing about him, which is the way he collects people. Wade, Floyd, Michael, Ron. He surrounds himself with people he can keep, and he cannot stand to be left, and he punishes them viciously and clings to them anyway. Look at who he gathers. Ron, a jittery paranoid convinced the government is reading his mail. Wade, slow and sweet and lost. Men nobody else would take in. Men the world had already set down by the side of the road, which is the same place he draws his victims from. He didn't so much befriend Ron and Wade as take them, peeling them off whatever lives they'd had before, and rebuilding them around himself, until leaving stopped being a thing they could picture. He collects the discarded, and then can't decide, day to day, whether to shelter them or destroy them. A man abandoned as a child, terrified of being abandoned again, holding people close with one hand, and hurting them with the other. And under all the collecting is something more naked than loneliness. Nearly everything he reaches for, the empire, the respect, the deal with the triads he keeps chasing and botching, is a man trying to get somebody, anybody, to accept him as he is. The triads he courts so hard end up deciding he and Michael must be lovers and want nothing more to do with him, and the respect he's starving for keeps showing up as a punchline. Rejection lands on him like a blade and comes back out as a body. Even the meth pipe, you keep catching him with traces to it, a habit he picked up mourning Michael and never put down. Catch him alone after one of his big dreams falls through, and you can find him quietly weeping over it, this walking catastrophe of a man crying because the world told him no one more time. The quarry and Floyd's apartment are what happens when the people he collects disappoint him. And then there's Michael, the betrayal so large the whole game bends around it. Years back, the two of them ran a heist up in the frozen north that went wrong, and Trevor watched his best friend get shot down in the snow and spent the next 9 years believing Michael was dead. He mourned him. He carried it. What actually happened is that Michael quietly cut a deal with the authorities, faked his own death, and slipped off into witness protection with a new name and a mansion by the beach, and left Trevor grieving a lie. And the grave Trevor had made his peace with, the one he thought held Michael, turned out to hold Brad. And Brad wasn't nobody. Brad was the man Trevor had recruited to be his own, the partner he was quietly planning to build a future around once Michael went soft. When Brad had floated cutting Michael loose to run with Trevor alone, Trevor said no, out of loyalty, the same loyalty Michael was at that very moment cashing in to have him killed. So the bullet meant for Trevor found Brad instead, and the one man who chosen Trevor died in his place and got lowered into a grave with Michael's name on the stone. Trevor even mutters, once, that maybe he did Brad in himself, which either means nothing or means he's lost count of his own dead. Either way, he grieved the wrong grave for 9 years. When Trevor finally learns Michael's alive and digs up that grave with his own hands and finds Brad's bones looking back at him instead, you're watching the wound from his childhood tear open in adult form. Someone he loved chose to leave him, chose to let him believe the worst, and did it on purpose. It's the deepest cut this man has. And here's the tell that says everything about him. He never makes Michael pay for it. He rages and threatens and makes the man's life hell. But when the moment finally comes where he could end him, he can't do it. The man who feeds strangers to cannibals for a laugh cannot bring himself to kill the one person who truly wronged him, because being left is the one thing he can't stand to do to somebody else. There's a small, brutal detail that puts a bow on the whole Michael wound. Somewhere in the 9 years he spent believing his friend was dead, Trevor had himself tattooed. a memorial across his own skin. Michael's name, the years of his life, and the word brother. He wore the grief on his body. And the moment he learns the truth, that the death was staged, and the brother simply walked off and let him mourn, the game quietly lets you drive to a parlor and have it lasered off. You can erase the memorial with your own hands, which is about the closest Trevor ever comes to saying out loud what the betrayal did to him. Even the way he sleeps tells on him. Rest as Michael or Franklin, and a few hours tick by on the clock. Let Trevor lie down and half a day is gone. 12 hours at a stretch, the dead heavy sleep of a body coming down hard off the meth he runs on, to keep the grief and the noise shoved back. He isn't resting so much as crashing, over and over, for as long as the story will let him. He even hands you the rule himself, near the end, sitting with Franklin. Loyalty is the code, he says. Kill strangers. Protect friends. Eat enemies. It sounds like something a man mutters coming down off a high. It's the whole operating system written in one line. Protect friends is why, after everything, he can't put Michael down. Eat enemies is the cannibal pipeline running under the entire story. And kill strangers is the drifters, stated out loud, as policy, with nobody in the room bothering to hear it. Which leaves the last question, and it's the one almost nobody thinks to ask. Not why Trevor does it. Why the story protects him. Why cut to black? Why delete the phone call? Why rename a double murder after a surf move and leave the trophy on the truck? Why take the panic out of him and make him calm? And the answer is the most unsettling thing in the whole design. Grand Theft Auto 5 needs you to enjoy being Trevor. Michael is a killer you're allowed to root for. Franklin is a kid with a code. But if you were shown plainly what Trevor really is, the drifters and the hitchhikers and the quarry and the strangling and whatever happened to Floyd behind that door, the fun would curdle in your hands and you'd stop wanting to hold the controller. So it films him right up to the line, then turns the camera, hands you a breezy title, lets him joke about the San Andreas Strangler, and trusts you to laugh and keep driving. The comedy is doing a job. It keeps you comfortable enough to sit an inch away from him for 30 hours laughing, while the thing beside you is what it is. Go back and watch the leg in the toilet one more time. Now, knowing what you know. The joke doesn't land the same way twice. The second time through, it's just a man calmly working a piece of a body down his drain, and you're the one who laughed at it. There's one more layer under all of it, and it comes from the man who built him. When Rockstar's lead writer first introduced Trevor, he called him the other side of the whole Grand Theft Auto coin. Someone driven purely by desire and resentment with no thought for tomorrow, all id and no breaks, who won't take an insult from anybody, and kills without remorse, but turns sentimental when it suits him. Read that again. It stops sounding like a character, and starts sounding like a description of how people play these games. The running strangers down for fun, the killing with no reason and no memory of it after, the mayhem you cause the second, nobody's grading you on it. Trevor is what a Grand Theft Auto player already becomes when the missions aren't looking, handed a face and a name and made playable. So dressing him up as a punchline does double work. It keeps him fun to ride around with, and it keeps the mirror good and fogged. Because if the game ever let you see him plainly, you'd have to see what you've been doing in this world for 20 years. And they didn't pull him purely out of thin air, either. Trevor's temperament was modeled in part on a real man, an English inmate once billed as the most violent prisoner in the country. Someone famous for erupting into savagery over nothing, and frightening everyone around him for decades. Rockstar took that and handed it a controller and a comedy edit. The character you've been laughing at for 30 hours is a cartoon laid over a real and dangerous kind of man. And it works. Play through once and you'd swear Trevor killed maybe 50 people, all in missions, all on screen. Most of them people who came looking for it. Then you go back and count the other list. The drifters, and the quarry, and the buried bodies, the mountain friends. The strangling he says he gave up, and the number stops being something you can hold. The people who actually try to tally it land somewhere in the hundreds, more than any character the series has ever handed you, and even that leaves out everything the game agreed not to show. It was never 50. 50 was just the part they let you see, and he was built to be uncountable on purpose. The game even hands you a chance to be rid of him. One of its endings lets Franklin put Trevor down, and plenty of players, worn out by him or quietly unnerved by him, take it. But the ending the story treats as the real one, the one it clearly wants you to pick, is the one where all three of them live and walk away rich. Trevor makes it out. Of course he does. He always does. Years later, the online spin-off checks back in to tell you where he ended up. And it's Ron, the man who spent years terrified of him, who delivers the news. Trevor got out, cleaned himself up, went Hollywood. He's a wellness guru now, a lifestyle coach, and Ron figures he's probably even got the abs to match. The man with the leg in the toilet, and the quarry behind him, and a dead couple's teddy bear bolted to the front of his truck, never got caught, never stopped, and never paid for a single thing he did. But look at the move he just pulled, because you've watched it the whole way through. He did the deed, gave it a harmless new name, and let everyone move on like nothing happened. A wellness guru. Hang 10. Nothing serious. It's the only trick he has ever had. And it's the exact trick the game ran on you for 30 hours. Filming a killer and calling it a comedy so you'd keep your hands on the controller. Trevor renamed his crimes and walked away clean. Grand Theft Auto renamed Trevor and sold him to you as the fun one. Same move, twice. You just never noticed you were the one it worked on.